the areas of the human experience that can be utilised to expand a fantasy world and all at once make it more mysterious and relatable. And with so many worlds that make up the multiverse, the endless variety of meals and cuisine would surely make for a unique menu. Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things magic, flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And today, what are we talking about? Nathan? Are we talking about the Strixhaven release? The Strixhaven cards?
Oh, right, yeah. Or are we talking about the Warhammer expansion that we're
Lord of the
gonna get?
Rings? We could be talking about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, we could be talking about that. Are we, to be fair, there is some positivity out of this. We could be even talking about the massive trans movement that Tolarian Academy did, which, out of all of this last week, is a shining positivity in all of the other things. But no, we're not being relevant.
We're not talking about that. Are we talking about the Wizards restructuring or the Wizards rebranding in Hasbro? Are we talking about Time Spiral Remastered? We could be talking about
that's
Time Spiral
coming
Remastered.
out. I forgot about that one, to be fair.
Or are we talking about the crazy Tron tweet that Magic put out and everyone lost their shit over?
Oh, right, yeah, because you should be playing Tron. Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah.
No, we're not, none of that.
We're not talking about any of that shit, okay? If you are coming to this podcast today to listen to us talk about anything of that shit, whether it's brilliant, like the amazing work that Tolarian Community College have done raising money for trans charities, or all the bullshit white noise that has been Magic the Gathering over the past 2 weeks.
Oh, right.
We ain't talking about any of that. We are going to be talking today about a stupid little joke that I thought about a week and a half ago, and I'm going to try and spin it out into an hours-long podcast. We are talking about today about the food of the multiverse.
Being relevant is boring. Being relevant is tiring.
Yes.
Let's avoid it.
We've both been saying that we're a little bit fatigued, shall we say, with all the magic white noise that's been out there. So instead, what I've done is I've compiled a food menu, compiled of all the different meals that can be found across the multiverse. So there's been a lot of research put into this, maybe a little bit too much on my part, but also a lot of help. And I'm going to say big thank you to the Magic community in general, especially the people on the Rules Committee, the Commander Rules Committee Discord, in their Vorthos and Law section, a lot of people on our Twitter who are on our kind of little Twitter circle, and especially Kelly Diggs, who was one of the lead creators and writers for Magic Law and World Building for quite a long time, who jumped into our Twitter feeds and Twitter threads and really helped us out with a lot of these different references. Essentially, what's going to happen today is we are going to talk through all of the actual physical references for food and drink that I deem interesting. I've compiled it into a menu. I'm going to ask Nathan what his menu picks would be, as if he was sat down at the restaurant at the end of the multiverse, which is a very clever nerd joke if you know what that reference is. And we're going to talk about food and shoot the shit and not give a fuck about all the bollocks that's going on in Magic at the moment. Does that sound good to you, Nathan?
It does indeed. The only thing I think annoys me about the menu is at the bottom it doesn't say "and thanks for all the fish."
It doesn't say thanks for all the fish.
But we were close for the book ending of reference.
So what's going to happen, guys, as well, is that I have actually, I've mocked up a menu, and what I'm going to do is I'm either going to try and share it as a viewable file in the episode description, so you can kind of follow along with us as we go, just through the episode description. If I can't do that, it will at least be pinned to the top of our Twitter. So I'm not going to be like, oh, use this as an opportunity to follow us on Twitter or any of that shit, although please do. But if you just want to have a look at the menu and follow along as we're going, because there's quite a lot of references on there, then it is on there. We will also be talking about through all of my different picks. The caveat for this, so this is the game, because games need rules if we're going to be playing this game, is that I didn't want to just have an episode where we theorize about, or like I made up what I thought food on different planes was going to be. So, for example, Fiora, which is the loosely Renaissance Italy, maybe slightly later period, but it's the Italian plane, right? And so that's the conspiracy set. So what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to be like, oh, well, I want pizza on the menu. What plane would have pizza? Oh, Fiora would have pizza because it's Italian, right? No. What I wanted to do is I wanted to find actual times that either on cards, so it has to be in the card art, it has to be in the card flavor text, or it has to be in references in story, and it has to be something specific. And I want it to be like descriptive, and then I'll put that into the menu, and then we can actually sort of like see what different people around the multiverse are eating and drinking. The reason I came up with this format, I don't know if you know, Nathan, I've been listening to a podcast with comedians James Acaster and Ed Gamble called Off Menu. Have you listened to Off Menu podcast?
Oh, I haven't. No, I think you've mentioned them before, though.
Yeah, so there's a couple of English comedians, for those of you that might not know them, and they do a podcast where they get on different comedian friends and different celebrities, and they basically do like the dream restaurant. So in this format, they basically ask their guest to pick whatever they want for their menu, but they have like, what would be your starter, what would be your drink, blah, 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 blah. But obviously I've done the menu for us, and we'll pick from that menu, because, otherwise that's just literally lifting their format. But I've listened to like about 30 hours of that podcast this week because of my new job and the commute. So it's literally been in my brain. So that's what we're going to do. I don't know if this is going to be interesting or fun, but I just can't be asked to talk about controversy.
Don't tell them that. Don't tell them that.
I can't promise fun. I can never promise fun.
Yes, this is the thing. Like the two caveats, I guess, before we start off, is that one, it's me, right? A human planeswalker, choosing off of the menu, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously going to tailor my taste buds, and obviously I can't talk from the point of view of a dragon. And also the other caveat is that the menu doesn't have pricing, which I think you're very smart not to have gone into depth about what you think comparative prices of certain items might be. I know, that's what I was thinking.
If I put that much effort in.
Oh, great! I mean, what would the currency be?
Well, there are currencies on Ravnica.
Yeah, I guess, comparative.
Right, let's get on with this then. So, the last caveat I'll say is that I am a meat eater. I'm not vegetarian or vegan. And I think you're a meat eater as well, Nathan, right?
I am indeed, yeah.
Cool. So we are obviously going to come at this from the perspective of meat eaters. Apologies to anyone that finds our tastes maybe not to theirs. I mean, there will be certain things on this menu where even if you are a meat eater, they're pretty heinous. So we will see. There is a little caveat at the top of my menu that reads, our transmutation chefs will be happy to prepare your meal with any and all dietary requirements in mind so that you may enjoy our entire menu. Simply ask your servo when you order. So if you are a veggie or you are a vegan and you think, well, in a fantasy setting, I would kind of like to know what that tastes like, but I still don't want something to die for my meal. Transmutation chefs are on hand to turn any and all plant matter into a reliable facsimile of the meal you're about to eat. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian because you literally don't like the taste of meat, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, when it gets around the, what we're going to call it, Walk Advisor instead of Trip Advisor. Because it gets around that, right? Because you need to cater for every audience, otherwise you're going to get some bad reviews out there. But this is an interesting thing. The thing that this sparked in my mind is that there will probably, inevitably, at some point be a planeswalking like chef at some point, I reckon, within the story. Someone who's like really like, you know how it's like Tamio's obsessed with stories. I can imagine that, but someone who's obsessed with different dishes, like eating every different type of dish. I think, is it Space Dandy or something? They go on like some big thing to get the best bowl of ramen in the universe.
Yes.
That would be a very cool short story if someone did that, about someone who samples the best delectable bits from different planes and brings herbs and spices from different various places. It's already, this is a really cool idea. As soon as you came up with this, I was like, oh yeah, oh that's great, that's genius. So obviously with Eldraine, now food is an official thing within the multiverse. Let's see what they do with it going forwards. Once we're over the Phyrexian shit that's going to be happening, we can actually have fun again.
For sure. So yeah, I've compiled this menu. I will say this isn't an exhaustive menu as well. There are plenty of things that I didn't include, and also there are lots of really cool ideas that I didn't include as well. So when I asked people on Twitter, because I didn't want to give the game away too much, I didn't want to give my sort of thinking away straight away, I just asked people on Twitter, are there any food related cards or references that you think are interesting and cool, whatever my little prompt was. And a lot of people came up with some really interesting ideas. There was lots of calls for things like, well, Zendikar is technically edible if you're an Eldrazi.
That was brilliant. Tasty little snack. Yeah, just have a little munch on Zendikar.
Yep, there's lots of stuff like that. Things like the devour mechanic. There's a whole mechanic around eating.
Right, John, of course.
Right? Also, obviously, you have literally food and food tokens that came in Eldraine. I will just say, we'll get to it, but there are a lot of Eldraine foods on this thing because it was a very food-heavy plane. Although I've limited myself to only referencing one food token because obviously all the food tokens had food on them. Yep. Some of the foods as well are just kind of ubiquitous across Magic. So things like, we'll get to the wines and spirits and beers. I'm a beer drinker, so I really like IPAs, ales, and porters are like my beers that I drink. And I know you're a big beer drinker as well, Nath. But
Yeah, I'm just a big drinker.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I also drink wine and whiskey as well. I don't know why I'm
Yeah.
limiting it to beer. But there are just, I personally, and no one else gave me a reference to ale. So there is lots of individual references of ale, because ale is like the fantasy beer along with
Mhm.
mead. But there was nothing like, oh, this is what Ravnican ale tastes like, or this is ale as it is in Zendikar. Like I wanted, even if it was just a little description, I was going to grab it and put it in. But all the references of ale, even like in recent ones, it's just like, oh, Zareth went and collected 2 more glasses of ale. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, I
It's
can't really use
generic.
that. So I just
Right.
wanted to give you like a little insight into what I considered a reference and what I didn't. It was a bit of a fine line. There's one thing that I extrapolated on. So there's one item where I thought, okay, it just says it's this, but because of the plane that it's on, I extrapolated a little couple of details from it and what I thought that would taste like. And we'll see why when we get to it. But I just thought it was necessary for what we're doing. So yeah, that's it essentially. So let's get on with it without further ado. So we have starters and sides, main courses, desserts, wine, beers and spirits, and hot and soft drinks. Those are all our little different categories. So let's start with starters and sides. In the starters and sides, to give you an idea of what's on the menu, we have hot soup prepared by our goblin chefs, very hot, from Dominaria. We have mtflavouring, which is a traditional flatbread served with pickled mangoes, yogurt, chilies, and ginger. That's found on the plain of Kaladesh. We have honey bread, found on the plain of Dominaria. Spelt porridge, which is sweet and nutty, served hot from Eldraine. And kushkaval, which is a spicy and salty cheese with a hint of olive oil, found on the plain of Ravnica. Keshkaval is often referenced as the Eastern European cheddar, for those of you that aren't quite sure what Keshkaval is. So yeah, Nathan, what did you go for your starter?
I went for what I think is the most humorous from a meta perspective. Also, the thing I'm most likely to go for, and that's hot soup. I'm a big soup fan in general. I like everything from gazpacho through to chicken noodle soup. Cold, mint, don't care, hot, whatever. The thing I love about hot soup, arguably maybe I don't like about this one, is in the picture it looks quite thin.
Yeah.
And I usually like my soup a bit chunkier, but if we're going for like a starter, like an entree, then fair enough, that makes sense for the thin soup. Plus, I'm hoping it gets weighted to me like it is in the picture of hot soup. That's the thing I'm going for. I'm hoping it gets charged out to me through the restaurant, knocking tables asunder.
What was really interesting is that I put hot soup on because that was the first thing that almost everyone I asked went for when they went for food-related things. Funnily enough, they didn't go for the food token straight away, which is what I thought. They went for hot soup. But there's nothing on the card that suggests what soup it is. And so that's one of the only ones where I've gone, I can't not include it, even though it doesn't have a description. I'm going to have to put it in there. I mean, what does it look like to you? It's made by goblins. I assume it's Dominaria as well. I will say this. We're not starting off strong here. I assume it's Dominaria because it was in core sets and they look like Dominarian goblins. So that's what I went with.
I mean, you've got to assume it's plant. But the funny thing is, goblins traditionally aren't the best in terms of chefs. I've looked through a few different ones. You've got Orcish Librarian, who's just sat there eating books with library paste, which is hilarious in of itself. That's how goblins think they get knowledgeable, obviously. And then I also looked at Mon's Goblin Waiters, which is from Unstable. Not unstable, unhinged, sorry.
Yes.
And they talk about, rock and then cooked rock as separate things. And there's other ones where they talk about eating dirt. What's the point of planting the seeds in the dirt? Just eat the dirt. So I've got to assume it can't be super advanced, right? It can't be like a culinary delicacy. But at the same time, it's the first time I think I've seen an actual made meal from goblins, and if it's going to have to be transported across the front line, which it looks like it's being done, getting to all of the goblins in the trenches, to feed them, it's got to have some kind of heartiness to them. And if it's hot enough, I don't think it matters what's in it. But I assume it's got to be plant-based, right? It's going to be brothy.
Sure. I mean, it is, It's kind of pale green. I did wonder whether it was...
boogers.
That was genuinely what I was thinking.
Yes. Well, the thing is, goblins as well, right? The more sneezes in there, the better. The more meat, because I mean, cause there's a preamble for this in Lord of the Rings, right, as well, where the trolls are making that soup thing in the Hobbit, and he sneezes in it, and they go, extra protein or whatever. So I mean, there's a precedent for this within the multiverse. The thing is, the other ones are all fine and dandy. I really like the idea of methy thepler, and that kind of thing of an actual built meal where you have accompaniments and stuff like that. But I tend not to go for stodgy starters typically, so I avoided all the bread and everything. Kushkaval, I'd be very interested to see how Ravnica cheese tastes, because where is it milk? What are they milking?
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't seen much livestock. I wonder. I mean, Ravnica is the classic plane for what if other races get offended by their sort of reductive forms.
What, the
So they have
Minotaurs getting
Minotaurs.
annoyed?
Yeah,
Yeah, the cats, exactly. What are you doing to my wife?
yeah. I mean, I always think that. I mean, it's Dominaria is the other one as well, where we have like knights riding panthers in the panther race army. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Sure. So that's cool. Hot soup, nice and classic. I am a big soup person as well. I think though I always, my eyes are bigger than my stomach when it comes to when I eat out. So I'd probably go for honey bread from Dominaria, which is just nice and plain and simple honey bread. The references for these, I will read out where I got all these references as well. So mtflavouring is an Indian-style breakfast usually, or it's used. The bread itself is used as a side. So the served with like yogurt and chilies and all this kind of thing is kind of a breakfast food, and it's described by Chandra in the story Homesick by Chris Lertulli in 2016. So it was part of the Shadows of Innistrad stories, where her and Liliana are talking about food, and Chandra bemoans that Ravnicans have no concept of how to eat well because they skip breakfast and they have like stupid meals or whatever else. And then she goes on to describe this breakfast that she has on Kaladesh. There's also in the Chandra comics, who's Chandra's mum?
Pia.
That's the one. She brings in a breakfast platter for Chandra, although you just see it, she doesn't describe what it is. So that's a real world dish that they've obviously put in. And in fact, a lot of the Kaladesh dishes on this are actually real world Indian foods or foods from that part of the world that they used in Magic as well to kind of flesh out that plane. Spelt porridge. Do you know what spelt is?
Yeah, it's like
S-P-E-L-T.
yeah, it's a type of grain. Like you can make spelt bread, which tends to be a little bit tougher. It's a bit more like wholemeal compared to
I had no
bread.
idea. It's essentially you're right. It's a grain which you use basically in place of whole grain flour. And it's slightly coarser and it's got a sweet and nutty kind of quality to it. So spelt porridge is referenced in The Wildered Quest by Kate Elliott from the Plane of Eldraine, along with like all those ubiquitous things like people have like sausages and apples and whatever else. Hot soup is obviously from the card Hot Soup, art by David Palumbo. Kushkaval, the cheese, is referenced in the card Ratcatcher in the flavor text, and its Ratcatcher is using Kushkaval to catch rats. I don't necessarily think Kushkaval is used as a starter or a side, but I just kind of thought you have like buffalo cheese as starters sometimes, so
yeah, for sure.
Whack it in there. This is making it very obvious. I'm not a culinary like curator. I don't make menus for a living. My brother does. He works in pubs, and so he's worked with chefs before. But so I'm sure he would shout at me. And then honey bread is referenced in the story Return to Dominaria by Martha Wells from 2018, part of the Dominaria stories. It's Shana, Sisay's descendant. Is that her name, Shana?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yes.
Shana,
she mentions about how her sister burnt honey bread when she was flirting with local boys when they were younger, and it caused quite the scene. And it was part of a celebrationary thing. But I quite liked the idea of honey bread being the kind of bread course.
Yeah, I guess there's an interesting, conversation to be had about planes which do have, as you say, sentient animal life forms. Are they more likely to have plant-based diets because there's that ethical quandary? Obviously we're reflecting this is what the whole point of the episode is, right? Reflecting real life as a meta narrative into so I guess things like most planes will have to have like a plant-based diet anyway, and then I guess it depends on what races they are, because I think also fantasy settings are a little bit more ruthless anyway. Like that hunt to survive aspect is obviously going to be a lot more true. We don't just planes like Ravnica and Dominaria where they can just sit around going, I guess we'll just chill, I guess we'll go out for lunch, as opposed to certain planes where it's I have to go and hunt to be able to eat.
Yes.
I guess there's obviously a bit of a difference. And I guess that's what is interesting about this restaurant at the end of the multiverse of, I guess you go out to different planes sometimes and to try and see if there are delicacies and cuisines, or you compare it to like this plane specifically has really cool selections of mushrooms that other planes don't have. But going there and hunting them out is very, very difficult because you've got big baloths coming after you and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a nice internal dialogue that I've got in my head now of how these dishes are created, and obviously going into main courses, I think that's going to be an interesting thing to talk about.
I think looking into, because Ravnica is going to feature quite heavily in this as well, because it's such a fleshed out plane. The more fleshed out planes, especially the ones that have like large populaces tend to also have more writers referencing food and things like that.
Mm.
Ravnica is kind of confirmed to have quite a heavily plant-based diet, not only because you're right, they have a lot of anthropomorphized like races, so you wouldn't necessarily be chowing down on bull or whatever when your Minotaur mate is sat across from you, but the Golgari are also in charge of a lot of the food production, so their kind of fungus aesthetic and their whole kind of remulching and repurposing of matter tends to lead to like a more plant-based fungal thing. So I think Ravnica, as you kind of astutely pointed out, does have quite a plant-based diet, although they do have some meat as well. Cool. I'd be interested to see, if you're listening to this, do let us know for each of these courses what you would pick. Again, the menu will be along on our Twitter, so you can literally reference in the Twitter posts what meals you would pick. All right, so hot soup starter. Would you have a starter or would you have it on the side?
I prefer starters over desserts. Like, as much as my sweet tooth is like really sweet, I love things like butterscotch, custard, that kind of thing. I typically would go for a starter and then a main with a side and then forgo dessert, ideally.
Oh, interesting.
That's usually how I go for. I like savoury flavours in restaurants, and I kind of want to sample as much as possible. So yes, I usually do go for a starter.
That's funny. I would usually skip the starter, have a side and a main course, and go for dessert.
That's traditional. I don't know why. I tend to be quite fussy when it comes to sweet things, so I prefer to have autonomy. Whereas with starters and anything that's savoury, I'm like, fuck it, make it weird. We'll get into this when we get into the main courses. Make it weird, and I will love it. I will put it in my mouth and enjoy it. So yeah,
fair enough. All right, well, let's talk about the main courses then. So for main course, we have rice. We have rice and beef, a simple and filling course from the plain of Ikoria. We have rabbit and frillhorn tamales, steamed with a choice of sauces from Ixalan. We have honey smoked horror being the creature type horror, a street food style dish served with a spicy sauce from Ravnica. We have a roast unicorn, a unicorn head served with all the trimmings from the plain of Dominaria. A meat pie, and that's as far as I'm going to for the name of those. The meat pie. Well, also, we'll talk about this in a second, but
yeah.
We'll talk about this in a second. So we have meat pie. It's a lattice top short crust pie filled with our delicious secret ingredient from the plain of Eldraine, and a Viashino style curry, an incredibly hot curry with diced meat spiced with vegetables and fungus, again from the plain of Ravnica. Meat pies, for those of you that don't live in British colonies or ex-British colonies, so this is basically for our stateside listeners. The British put meat in pies. You with your sweet pies and your American pie, I don't know what the hell you're doing. We have crumbles and shit, but yeah, we put meat in short crust pies and put them in the oven and serve them with chips and gravy and shit.
Unless you're talking about mince pies at Christmas, which are not mince because it's sweet mince, and that's a sweet pie. God, it's fucked.
Oh my god. I think, what was it, Pleasant Kenobi I saw on Twitter, this is 2 months ago, this is just what popped into my head. He put a picture of a pork pie, a mini pork pie, on Twitter and asked people what they thought it was, and obviously half people got it right because people know, but a lot of people were thrown off by the size. So we have pork pies in England are short crust pies filled with pork, in England, sorry, but we tend to not really eat them at full size. Size is like a apple sized thing. We tend to have them as mini pork pies, which are small, like the size of a golf ball, but that's the usual way we eat them. And I think having a mini pie filled with pork,
it does seem weird when you think about it, but then you get a big one and you're like, what the hell is this?
What the fuck is this?
Am I tiny? Yeah, it's really strange. It's like when you see oversized packages of food from other countries. I've seen a 2-kilogram pot of Nesquik before, and I'm like, oh, and I don't know why, but your brain just automatically just goes, oh, it's bigger than normal. Yeah, I don't know. And what was the other one I was going to say? Yeah, the fact we've got jelly in them, but it's not sweet jelly, it's savory jelly.
Yeah, it's to preserve.
Right? And it does get started on biscuits, because some certain biscuits go on top of stews, certain biscuits you dip in your tea. So, food. Weirdly, food.
Just qualify what a meat pie is. People know. I'm not trying to accuse of people from different countries of being totally ignorant. It's a common joke that the British and some parts of Canada and some parts of Australia do this thing with pies. But it's funny how you do have to check yourself when you think it's totally normal, but actually it is very specific to your country. So yeah, that's what that is.
Well, we should probably also mention that the meat pie is that the secret ingredient isn't love, right? As the flavour text.
You got it.
Yeah, I did.
Sure. Yeah, we will get to the meat pie.
Cool.
And
well, I'm not going to go for that one for that reason. So weirdly enough, the one that reads off the menu immediately something that I know that I'd like and enjoy is the Viashino style curry. But I mean, considering one, it's very hot and it's Viashino. This is the thing, because Viashinos can probably handle their heat like infinitely better than I can as a human. It'll
Yes.
probably burn a hole in my stomach. So, carrying with the theme of if it's weird, I'll probably try and eat it. Honey smoked horror. Hell yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
If you cook it, that means it's got to be at least tasty to some people, right? So
Mhm.
it's not as if you're out there, unless it's like a Rakdos thing where they're trying to be douchey and they're going, ha ha ha, sneaky, sneaky, feed people things that aren't very nice. I would be really interested to see what horror is. And then, does each horror have taste the same? Is each week a batch of horror? Is that an extra scary horror that tasted extra? This is where my brain and I haven't eaten breakfast, by the way, deliberately, specifically for this reason, because it's making my mouth water now thinking about like. I really like biltong and things like that, so I'm imagining like this sweet jerky kind of aspect, and you got to tough it out. Yeah. As I say, I'm hungry now, and it's making my mouth water. So yeah, I'd definitely go for the honey smoked horror. Sounds great.
There's meats that are out there that I don't think are usually in the kind of Western, at least the Northern Hemisphere, sort of taste palette. That I think when you eat them, you kind of realize like, holy shit, like there is like a whole world of meats out there that you're not quite sure of. Again, for those of you that are vegetarian and vegan, this is probably not the bit of the podcast for you, so I do apologize. But I did a rugby tour when I was a teenager in South Africa, and I got to try crocodile. And crocodile is quite a thick steak, but it breaks apart into fibers, and it doesn't taste. It's not fishy, but it has like a hint of fish. If you imagined a fish kind of got turned into a cow,
Right, crocodiles. Quote Andy Mann. Imagine if a fish turned into a cow. But I guess it's their diet, right? Because they eat fish.
Well, yeah, and just they sit in water all the time.
Yeah.
So I had an alligator, a crocodile, and it was my point is that it was meat, but it was a new experience of meat, right? It's like when you suddenly have gamey meats for the first
that's
time,
what I was
and
gonna
it's
say.
different.
Yeah.
So I would imagine horrors to have that kind of thing. It would be familiar yet slightly different. So you're going for the honey smoked horror, served with street food style, served with spicy sauce.
Purely out of curiosity,
Yeah. I would go for that, or the rabbit and frillhorn tamales from the Plain of Ixalan. So frillhorn in this instance references dinosaurs. So a frillhorn is a dinosaur. So I know what rabbit tastes like. Now, would a dinosaur, again, this is the crocodile thing, it could taste like crocodile. Because
it could taste like chicken, right?
Or it could taste like chicken.
Yeah, because birds originally came. But what's the thing? I guess it's muscle use, right? Is this the thing that, as a chef in the restaurant at the end of the multiverse, you've got to have to consider? Certain things like veal taste better because it's the muscles less worked, right? And the best parts of a cow are like the bits in between the ribs at the back because they're used less. Something like a horror, say, for example, if it moves in a certain way that doesn't require its muscles to be used, it might be super tender, whereas like, say, I'd imagine certain like say a dinosaur, if you've had to, I guess if it's older as well, like people prefer eating meat when it's young, right? Like lamb compared to mutton. So I guess I guess that's another question of if dinosaurs then live for a really, really long time, ideally you'd want to eat a younger one, I guess, for it to be a more delectable meat. But then maybe, like with mutton, where it takes on a different flavour the older it gets, maybe it's better older. I really shouldn't have done this without eating breakfast, Andy. What have you done? All I'm doing is thinking about different flavours of dinosaur.
I think I'm going to go for the rabbit and frillhorn tamales.
Yeah.
I really like. I love Mexican food, and obviously, I mean, it's not quite Mexican food; it's Mesoamerican, but it's in that same sort of part of the world, and a lot of the base ingredients are very similar. So I think I'd go for rabbit and frillhorn tamales. But the choice of sauces.
I guess there's also the question now: is roast unicorn? Is that a faux pas?
Right.
In the same way, I get putting like humans in your meat pies is bad, right? That's fair enough, but that's always got precedence. Like we've got what's his name, the demon barber of Fleet Street, as well as witches eating kids. Like that's got precedence. Is eating a unicorn really bad? Like in Harry Potter,
yes.
it's not.
I'm
going
to tell you right now, it is. So the reference for, I'll go through the references now. So the reference for roast unicorn is the card Feast of the Unicorn, and there are two cards which have the name Feast of the Unicorn. So my reference for it is the 6th edition version, which literally has a picture of a roasted unicorn head sat on a platter with lots of different trimmings. The flavor text is, could there be a fouler act? No doubt the Baron knows of one, referenced by Autumn Willow. So yes, it is considered quite a horrible thing. And then the other card, Feast of the Unicorn, shows a bunch of mogs eating a unicorn in the background, and the flavor text on this version says, "Some delicacies are not to be savoured, save by the callous," by Baron Senkir.
God, for Baron Sengir to say that is
Yeah.
that's pretty extreme.
Now, I will say that there have been foods that I've come across in restaurants, or I've seen foods and know how they've been made, and even as a meat eater, I've either regretted or abjectly refused to eat certain foods, or kind of gone, oh, maybe I need to change my eating habits, which is what half the argument for not eating meat is. It's the practices and the kind of cruelty.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're not blind to it. As meat eaters, we're just lying to ourselves, really. Like, morally speaking,
pig just tastes good. It's really hard.
Like, we have no leg to stand on, which makes us horrible. But I just kind of feel like, how could you...
Right.
I might have to tell my servo to get the transmuter chefs to turn a bunch of fungus into a unicorn head, because I have to know. I have to know.
Well, it's the funny thing, again, like on Mon's Goblin Waiters, there's on their list of there's unicorn on the cob, which is more that makes it more amusing, but no less callous and horrible. And I guess the ultimate flex is to have the marrow out of the horn, right? Like, that's got to taste real good. And also, is it because it's got magical qualities? Do they then taste better? Obviously, like, does it make the food more invigorating? Would it likely make the food harder to cook? Would it make it easier to cook? Like, these are also interesting questions.
Super horses.
They are super horses, yeah. But people don't eat horse very often. That's the thing. It's not a very...
They do. Well, they do in certain countries.
Yeah, of course, but like less so. Like, it's not as widely used as a meat, right? I guess there's probably reasons for it beyond ease of generation. Like chickens and pigs and cows are probably much easier to farm. But,
they're easier to farm. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I feel like you putting that on the menu, I was like, oh, that's a conversation, right? But yeah, I guess everything's edible if you're brave enough, right? Especially in the multiverse.
Well, quite. So let's go through some of the references then. So the rice and beef, it's a fairly boring meal, but I thought I'd put something on there that was a bit simpler, is from Ikoria, and it's from the story The Sundered Bond by Django Wexler. He describes the soldiers as eating rice and beef as their kind of a staple meal. We have Rabbit and Frillhorn Tamales is from the story Who Tells the Stories by Alison Lurs, 2018. So it's the second to last story from the Ixalan arc. I didn't quite know. The sentence that it's in says rabbit and frillhorn tamales and another food, like there was a third thing. And I didn't know whether it meant rabbit was one meal, frillhorn tamales was another, and then there was this third thing, or it was rabbit and frillhorn tamales, then this next thing. I asked my wife, I literally just read her the paragraph without any kind of context and asked her what she thought the meals were, and she said it read like it was rabbit and frillhorn tamales, like together. So that's what I've done there. Also, an interesting little fact there, they used the tamales as a little signifier about how matter travels through the blind eternities. So in the next story, so Huatli planeswalks at the end of that story where she has this big meal with the tamales, and she takes some in a bag to planeswalk with. And then in the next story, you see her emerging in the plane that she's arrived on, Kaladesh, if anyone's interested. And she's upset that her tamales didn't make the journey. Okay. So her food got wasted, which is a bit of a shame.
Oh man, yeah, your snacks are gone. It's also interesting to think that there's a hunter out there that goes hunting for rabbits and also dinosaurs just to make this one meal.
I mean, they could be, rabbit might be another name for a dinosaur. Because they thought that dinosaurs were dragons, and vice versa. There we go. Viashino curry, incredibly hot with fungus, vegetables, and chunks of meat, is referenced in the story The Gathering Storm, Chapter 3 by Django Wexler, 2019. It's Tomic and Ral are eating curry. Tomic's having a much milder curry because he says he can't understand how Ral can have his curry like how the Viashino have it, which again is how it's described in the menu. So it's definitely a meal for people who have quite a high constitution. I can't handle spice anywhere near as much as the average person. I'm a bit of a wimp. So, I would not have the curry. I do love curry, but I'm creamy over spice.
Yeah, for sure. When I don't know, I don't go for the hot curries in a restaurant I haven't been to before, because sometimes even their vegetable curry like kicks you for six. So, yeah.
When I read the menu back to, again, Holly, my wife, because I was kind of testing this out on her, because she knows about magic and she understands magic, and she's just not half as invested as we are. If I can go figure. I said to her, Viashino curry. And she went, is that curry made from Viashinos? So I had to put in Viashino style curry, just in case people think we're cooking up lizard people, which would be ethical, weirdly. Roasted unicorn head, as we've discussed, is from the cards Feast of the Unicorn. And then meat pie is from the card Bake Into a Pie, art by Zoltan Boros. and the flavor text mentions that the secret ingredient certainly isn't love. And obviously the function of the spell is that you destroy target creature and you create a food token. So yeah, you're eating whatever you've killed,
Yeah.
presumably a humanoid.
Because the funny thing is, as well, like, it kind of shows that artwork. It shows like a pretty prestigious like culinary expertise. Like to make a lattice, like a pastry lattice, shows some like advancement in cooking. So I guess it also massively depends. Like obviously, don't think there's anything from Keldheim here that I can see. Okay, I've got there is, but when we get to drinks, but like obviously, depending on progression, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like I guess societal evolution. I guess it massively depends on what you can and can't do in the kitchen, because we haven't talked about like there's no magicking food here. We're not talking about like how they do in Star Trek, where they have the bloody and it just forms anything that you want with the packaging
the
and everything.
replicator.
Exactly, which doesn't make sense to me anyway. But there is an precedent.
Of all the things in Star Trek, you're going to take issues with. That's the thing.
Yeah, like I don't know. Yeah, trust me. Like something from nothing. Like even Harry Potter just says that you take an item from somewhere else and bring it in, right? And I guess it's good.
I suppose I have seen. I mean, I say I've just shouted at you for it. I have seen forums where people have gone that the replicators, the kind of food and matter producing units in every single bedroom on a starship in Star Trek is nonsense. But
that's the height of
like
decadence.
it's sci-fi. Like
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I guess it's forgivable. But yeah, it's nice that magic at no point makes this idea that you can fabric something out of nothing. There's no like, and I just created this in my hand that you could have. Like,
well, it's all mana at least, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and also, what does mana taste like? Tasty mana.
I mean,
snacks.
what if you took a big swig of ether, pure ether?
Well, is it Manamorphose, the first one? Let me have a look. Manamorphose. I'm pretty sure the first flavor text talks about the goblin eating it. Let me just quickly check because I always thought when I saw it, I was always like, that sounds really nice. For a moment, objects of pure mana glimmered in the wonder-struck Boggart's hands. The next moment, they were in his mouth as he chewed contently. Now that's interesting. I'd love to know what mana tastes like, and it makes it look like these weird little jelly things. Like imagine like jelly snakes or something, where they've got that kind of sweet poppy kind of taste to them. Yeah, again, shouldn't have done this when I'm hungry. Moving on.
All right, let's move on to our dessert course then. Very good. So yeah, you've had hot soup, then you've had honey smoked horror. Honey smoked horror does seem. Oh, sorry, the honey smoked horror. The reference for that is the story The Illusion of Child's Play by Nikki Drayden 2019. That's the Rakdos story. So it's where the demon protagonist that we're following has that at a Rakdos festival.
Him. One who doesn't know how to flirt properly. Oh, God.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, so he has the street food there. So yeah. So there are actually quite a few references to Rakdos food and drinks. I don't know why. That seems to be quite a popular one when it comes to Ravnica.
Well, it's weird that none of the food in Eldraine is red on red cards. Yeah, I'd expect red to be the kind of colour that would enjoy food maybe more. I don't know why. I don't know why in my head it speaks to... But I imagine if you're going to be like a chef, you're more likely to be a red mage, not only because of the fire magic would help, obviously, but that creative aspect to it.
Sure.
Yeah, strange.
So our dessert course, we have jam tarts from the... plane of Eldraine. We have mango-flavoured snow from the plane of Kaladesh. We have fresh fruit, apples, pears, bananas, grapes served to your table on top of a zombie's head from the plane of Tarkir. We'll get to that. And we have a sentient gingerbread man. Please pre-order. This is advised as they tend to go fast from the plane of Eldraine. Yeah, I'm utterly hilarious when I do this.
I agree.
I was very proud of myself.
I was proud of you when it got to that point. I was like, oh yes, absolutely, of course. Yeah, I guess it's interesting. Like, this is the thing. Like, I guess had we looked at Eldraine, you can tell that there are some pastry chefs out there. So maybe they're and the fact they can make jam tarts. Clearly, Eldraine is a foodie. Playing shock horror, it brought the food mechanic into the game. But I like how the others. None of them are particularly say advanced. I guess fruit like. Sweet things typically don't have to be. There is obviously the prestigious Tassiger with his infamous plate of bananas.
Right.
So I guess when you do have sweet things like that, I mean, you don't have to do too much with them for them to be nutritious and delicious and all that nonsense. I really like whenever you get, this is I think the turning point in culinary expertise is when you take snow, you take a sweet flavour and you go, oh man, I've just invented ice cream. So I'd probably go for mango flavoured snow. One, because I'd really want to see if, obviously the real word references, they could have made up any number of words for all of the different fruits that are across the multiverse. We're going to presume that they have very, very similar flavours because that's the reference that we've got. But I would be interested to see if the palette of fruits across the multiverse is, you know, stronger, or if it's like, you know, like, do the fruits on Zendikar grow extra delicious because of the extra mana in, well, and obviously not now they're all just dust because of the but you know what I mean. Yeah, like, so that's kind of where my curiosity goes, and I like simple desserts as much as I'm a big fan of a good strudel when it's done properly. I like sorbet, so yeah, my instinct is mango flavored.
I'm very much in the similar place with the desserts. I don't necessarily go in for baked desserts, so people who have strudels or like apple crumble or whatever else. It's just not for me. I am a big ice cream fan as well, and sorbet. Funnily enough, I say I like simple desserts as well. If the ice cream meal, if you like, is the most complicated thing on the planet, I'm all in for it. Like, I love those kind of gutbuster Knickerbocker Glory ice cream sundae monstrosities. The more brownies, the more ice cream, the more chocolate sauce, a sparkler, have someone doing a backflip as they serve it to me. Like, I'm
TGI experience.
That. Yeah. Yeah. There's a restaurant chain called Smith and Weston. Do you know about Smith & Wesson?
I've known about Smith & Wesson, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if it's anywhere else. This might be an interesting. So it's a cowboy-themed restaurant, which now I know that the majority of our listeners are from the US. This is just so embarrassing for like UK. Basically, yeah, it's like a themed restaurant, right, for like cowboys, like Smith & Wesson, Smith & Weston. I think there's only like 2 or 3 around the country, but there's one in my hometown in Horsham, in the south, and like all the cheesy, like, Americana isn't obviously, like, as an adult, doesn't necessarily impress me, but the food is just unbelievable.
Yeah,
just
so indulgent.
Yeah, it's all like Tex-Mex and, you know, like ribs and, you know, but they do this Knickerbocker Glory gutbuster ice cream thing, and it's just like a vat of sugar and frozen shit. So yeah, I mean, to kind of put it all back, I also do like sorbets, which is kind of like the refined sort of like ice cream, if you like. So I would go for mango flavored snow. Interesting little.
Yeah, what part of? Because we didn't see much of Kaladesh that was cold, right?
No.
Which is interesting. Also, I noticed there wasn't any chocolate on the dessert menu. Was that deliberate, or is there? I guess there just doesn't match.
I couldn't find any references to it. I'm sure there are. Again, I will stress that this was a week of me looking on lots of different forums. I obviously can't read all of Magic literature. I'll look through, and this was also suggestions that were given to me, and chocolate just didn't seem to come up.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things. Again, the more processed the food is, the less likely in a fantasy setting you're going to see it. Which is again why I think it's impressive that certain planes like Eldraine have clearly put a focus on, you know, baking and things like that. Saying that, I think there is a certain joy, maybe this speaks to my personality, to have a sentient cookie scream as you like,
right, now this is right, okay, so this is not a moral dilemma. This is a bit like Feast of the Unicorn. So the sentient gingerbread man is obviously the reference to Ginger Brute, right? So that's from Eldraine, and that itself is a reference to the gingerbread man. So we all know that in like fairy tales and like, yeah, Shrek, as you say. So it's a gingerbread man, like the confectionery, that has been artificially brought to life.
Okay.
Now.
Okay, so it's kind of like if you animate a golem or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, but
I don't know where the line is, because in our society,
that's still really cruel, though, right?
Well,
Why would you
this
give
is it. So
personality just to eat it.
In our society, there are kind of, let's just say, 2 larger school of thoughts when it comes to the sanctity of sentience, right? If you believe in a god or a pantheon of gods or whatever, and you're religious, you tend to feel like your consciousness and your sentience comes from a higher place. If you're an atheist, or if you don't believe in that, you still hold the sanctity of sentience, because like it's almost like cosmically we're all equal. Like, we shouldn't be eating animals because they have just as much rights as we do, right? The kind of thing. So that's very broadly, very crudely the kind of where we're at. So if you do believe in something like, well, you're only sentient if you have a soul, then is it still okay to eat something? Are you then a god? If you
does that mean you're allowed to eat angels because they don't have souls?
It just opens up way too many doors. That I already feel a bit dirty trying to walk through. So maybe it was a mistake putting a ginger brute on there.
Well, no, 'cause I guess it is a question again because we now live in a society where again the need to hunt isn't as prevalent, especially like first world countries or Western society. Like we don't have to go and hunt to survive, so we can definitely have the choice of not needing to eat meat and not having to kill other things. To be able to survive, so there
Sure.
is a parameter there, and again, it's going to be difficult because each plane is going to have its own parameter of necessity over acceptability and that kind of thing. I think Gingerbread's just really funny. I just love the idea that you're this masochistic baker who just gives them sentience just to have the horror of them being eaten.
Because it's technically a humanoid.
Yeah. Exactly. And again, if it has personality, like at what point do you draw the line? I mean, again, who makes their food sentient? I mean, again, the fairy tale, I'd have to reread the grim version. I don't think it might be a grim version for the gingerbread of where it originally started. It's probably not nice and fluffy as they make it out in other media. But yeah, I think that's a very amusing thing to put on there. In general, I like the idea that you order a dessert and then it just comes pegging it out of the kitchen.
Well, yeah.
And then just goes running off out the door.
I immediately regret it. I really regret putting it on the menu as an option. There's an episode of Adventure Time. There's an episode of Adventure Time where Jake makes it's Bimo. Bimo makes sandwiches for Jake the dog using sentient ingredients.
Oh god, yeah.
And it's said to taste, it's like, because they're sentient, the sandwich tastes like a lot better.
Yeah, exactly. You can taste the emotion in it. Oh god, you can feel like the love.
Bimo squeezes the tomato for sentient ketchup.
Oh gosh. Again, the lines are so wonky here. Yeah, it's interesting.
Brilliant.
It's interesting.
Mango flavoured snow. Yeah, I'd like to go back to Kaladesh and see where they get the snow from. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess the ether might make... I guess they can make fridges, right? Because we use CFCs for it, right? I can imagine them fusing ether into a way that... whatever. We're already talking about food in a multiverse talk of conversation. Let's not try and confuse ether and electricity and stuff like that. Let's get drunk. Let's move on to the actual...
let's just go through references. So the jam tarts is the only food token that I referenced. So obviously each food token, because they did about 4 of them, art by Donato Giancola. There are lots of food tokens in the Eldraine set, and they all feature quite a few different foods. But most of them seemed to me to be quite ubiquitous. So you had like the fruit one, and you had like a pig's head, and blah 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 blah. Whereas I don't know of any other planes that seemed to have baked goods, and there's a token which has like croissants, and I assumed these were jam tarts. They look a bit too puff pastry to be jam tarts. Maybe I'm wrong, but I took them to be jam tarts, and had a few other things as well, like cinnamon swirls and whatever. So yeah, jam tarts from that Eldraine token. The mango flavored snow is referenced in the Kaladesh story renewal, written. It seems the credit goes to all of the Magic writers, and it's just collectively known as the Magic Creative Team. In 2017, I don't quite know why they haven't referenced one person. If they have, I'm sorry. Gingerbread is obviously... Well, the Gingerbread Man is from the card Gingerbread, as we've said, art by Vincent Pruce, but obviously that card we've used as an example of Up and Down. That's like one of the most flavorful cards ever, so you could take it as the whole card. And the Fresh Fruit is specifically referencing the original Chris Ryan art for Tasker, the Golden Fang. Because that's the thing that everyone latched onto with Tasker, other than him being a kind of a
douche nozzle.
lovely little sexy masochistic boy. He has a zombie with a fruit bowl on his head, and also there's a Sid McKinnon artwork that also has a similar thing. Like, it's just something the Sultide do.
Doesn't Liliana in not Kaladesh?
Yes, that is another reference as well. So I could have done that as well. You are right. So it's Liliana Death's Majesty.
Majesty, exactly. Yeah.
Also has her with another zombie with a whatever they call their zombies on Amonkhet. Can't quite remember.
Yeah, also interesting looking at like all the different cards that reference food. I know that Oko got a bad rap, but in my mind now, in my canon, because his plus is create a food token, he's just going around the multiverse, just giving people snacks, just little top-me-ups. Yeah, exactly. And the fact he turns other things into elks, like, I don't know, he ever take away the fact it's Oko, and I'm just looking at like Samwise. I'm just looking at a Samwise kind of port of being like just little tasty snacks for everyone. Just bring out some treats, some Jaffa cakes, handing them around. Cute guy. What a ledge. Anyway. See, context for food is really interesting. Again, a real world aspects placed into Magic kind of contextualize the flavour of it and kind of make the world building a bit more interesting. So, yeah, very cool.
All right, let's move on to wines, beers, and spirits. Technically, no beers actually on this list. Again, I said earlier on I tried to find ale It's very hard to find ale. So we have blood wine, which is dark red and good if you have work tomorrow, from Ikoria. We have dross, which is whipped dragon egg cream infused with herbs and sap resin from the plain of Kaldheim. We have mjod, which is MJOD, which is a golden mead redolent of wildflower fields, also from the plain of Kaldheim. And we have Bumbat, a highly alcoholic moonshine from the plain of Ravnica, and Nabiz, a spiced wine with cinnamon that can also be served hot, which is known as desert style from the plain of Dominaria. What's speaking to you?
Oh man, this is funny because this clearly speaks to my my personality and my habits. They all sound fucking delicious. I want all of them. I would like to try all of them. I think it's funny that one of them is called dross when dross in other forms is not a nice thing.
No.
It's interesting how language could be used, obviously, with different different backgrounds to mean different things in different contexts, which is quite nice. I really like mead anyway, but I mean, the funny thing is, so my favourite drink, I think, if I had to, gun to the head, is whiskey sour. So the dross kind of rings to me there because the idea of whipped dragon egg, like again, dragon egg's got to be super tasty, right?
It's like a cocktail, isn't it?
Like, right? And for Kaldheim, considering that Kaldheim hasn't shown much advancement in other things, the fact that they know how to whip up a dragon egg is very impressive to me. Because again, certain planes don't have the opportunity for what I like to call like excess, and usually food only develops into a very menu and diet when you have the ability to indulge in it, right? And you have the excess; it's not just necessity. So it's weird that Kaldheim, of all places, happen to have two different, well seasoned and garnished drinks. The fact there's golden mead with the word redolent, you're so pompous. I love you.
No, that's in the story. That is
it? Oh, it's that's such a great word. Redolent with wildflower fields. That's so nice. Like again, a good mead is so tasty. I'd probably avoid Bumbat, knowing it's likely to be like the European kind of styles of moonshine. I've tasted some spirits that I never want to see again in my life because they've kicked me for six. And as much as Nabiz sounds really nice as a hot dessert wine, I guess if that was the choice and I could have it dessert style or desert style.
Sorry, desert style, not dessert style.
Okay. Spice wine. See, that sounds like mulled wine to me, but I guess
it does sound like mulled wine.
Man, this is hard. Dross, I guess. Is blood wine specifically mixed with blood from any of the monsters? Do we know, or is it just known as blood wine because of its colour?
We don't know. We know. So I'll go through references. Whilst you think it over, I'll go through the references. Blood wine is from the Coria story, The Son of Bond by Django Wexler in 2020. It's where Lucas brings Jarina Kudrow a bottle of blood wine as a kind of peace offering because they have a fight at the start of the story. And it's said if it's good quality to not produce hangovers. So that's why I said it's good if you have work in the morning. And it just describes it as being dark red. And I kind of get the feeling it's a little bit contrabandy.
Yes, I did get that feeling of it. He had to kind of like sneaky it.
Yeah, so it could be full of nightmare blood, but who knows? It's a red wine. I'm a big fan of red wine. Yeah. Probably a bit too much. Dross and Mjod are from the story Aim Through the Target by Setsu Azumi from 2021, which is the Kaldheim stories side story. This is where Nico Aris is in the Hall of the Valkyries, and everyone's got those flagons that are just like endless drink of your choice. So the dross, which is funny as you say, in any other language, dross is a negative word. I think it is in Kaldheim as well, because when the Viking says he has dross, everyone else goes, "Oh, what the heck is that?" And he describes what it is: the whipped dragon cream egg fused with herbs and resin, and everyone looks at him like he's a nut job. It's also not explicitly said in the story whether it's alcoholic, because it doesn't say that it's got any alcohol in it, but I can imagine that I added in, firstly, when I put this in the menu, I added the word fermented, but it really didn't say that, so I took that out. But I can imagine that a dragon egg can fuck you up. Yeah. So that's in my head canon. Dragon eggs are like pure ethanol. So yeah.
You've also got to assume that any place that has wheat, because that's obviously going to be the tradition basis for bread and then ale, will then also be able to refine it into whiskey, right? So you've got to presume, there's a presumption that those planes are likely to have that progression.
Yeah, for sure. Mjod is, as I say, it's a golden mead redolent of wildflowers, or wildflower fields. That's exactly how it's described in the story. But it's the Viking who's drinking it. She says that it was a gift from her wife's family at their wedding. So I didn't want to say that it was specifically celebratory, but this is a mead that she had at her wedding when she was getting married to her wife. Bumbat is referenced quite a few times in different Ravnica stories, I think. But the one that I picked out was the Marytown Massacre by J. Moldenhauer Salazar from 2006. There was also one that Kelly Diggs, I said that Kelly Diggs had quite a lot to offer in references to food and drink. Kelly said that he thought it was a beer. He said like he kind of remembered it as being a beer because he didn't give me the specific reference. But when I looked it up several times, and I think it's in things like the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, I think I saw there was reference in there, although I haven't read it, so I can't confirm.
Oh yeah, there's bound to be some stuff in there about
drinks.
Sure.
That it was more of a moonshiny thing. It was more like a liquor than a beer, which is a shame. And then Nabiz is from the Brothers' War book by Jeff Grubb in 1998. So we're going for a deep cut there.
Nice.
And several characters drink Nabiz throughout the book, and one of the characters has it desert style, which is served hot. Oh, pardon me. So yeah, what are you thinking then?
So
you little alcoholic.
Yeah, right. Well, this is the thing. Like, if the dross is like somewhere between like a Purdy's and like a whiskey sour, then that would be my go-to in terms of if I only could have one. But I like a session, so I'm gonna have to go with blood wine.
Yeah, but you know
I also
what?
think it would go well with the other things I've chosen.
Funny. That's cool. I think I'd have to agree with both those points for exactly the same reason.
Yeah.
I really want to try dross. I'm not even a fan of cocktails that use egg or like whipped ones. Like I'm not a bit, or like milk and cream in general. That I don't like it, but I have to know.
Right. Again, if you put the word dragon egg on a menu, I'm like, well, yes, try that. Because it's similar when you said about the crocodile. Like, I've tried things like ostrich, and shark and things like that, specifically because I wanted to try something obscure. So,
ostrich is good.
Yeah.
So I think I'd have to go for blood wine as well. I mean, who doesn't want to drink wine with no consequences? Red wine is the best.
Yeah, the only bad thing about it is the next day when you can't get the smell out the back of your nose because you've done too many bottles of it.
It's when you go for your morning movement and you think you might die from the look of what's been left.
Yeah, your brain's still in bed and you have to pick it up and put it back in again because it's so heavy.
Oh yeah, your toilet bowl needs a bleaching. Anyway,
nice.
Moving on before. Yeah, but just before. We are going to go on to our hot and soft drinks menu. I'm not a big hot drink person with meals, even after them, but I think I had to put this in. Also, there's not a lot of reference. This is where we start to get into things with the drinks where they're either super specific or really vague. So there were no references to any soft drinks, really, that I could find. Like water, I can't put fucking water on this fancy menu. So it is mostly hot drinks, and then there's one soft drink.
You've also got to assume that any plane that has fruit is likely to have fruit juice.
Quite, yeah. So they don't tend to reference it, but there we go. So we have coffee, finely ground beans left in the cup to brew from the plain of Ravnica. We have Kapi, which is a foamy coffee found on the plain of Kaladesh. We have a tisane of rose hips, which is a fruit tea from the fruit, the rose hip, or the pseudo fruit, as I've seen it described. And it's a tart aftertaste with a fruity tea from the plain of Eldraine. And we have Sweet Lassie, a yogurt-based drink served cold from the plain of Kaladesh. I'm definitely sure I'm not pronouncing these Kaladesh names correctly. I do apologise. So Sweet Lassie is the only soft drink. So I suppose if you wanted that as well as a hot drink, you could go for it. But yeah, what's your hot drinks of choice?
Weird enough, I'm not really a big fan of coffee. Saying that, I had an Italian colleague make me an espresso before all the lockdown nonsense happened, and it might be one of the best things I've tried ever. So maybe I do like coffee. I just haven't had good coffee. Saying that, again, I'm not a big fan of hot drinks at the end of meals anyway, so I don't think I want something that's heavy. I think I'd probably go with the rose hip, the tisane of rose hip. I like tart aftertastes anyway, and I feel like it would be quite a decent palate cleanser. Again, if I'm drinking blood wine, don't really want to go to a yogurt-based drink.
No.
I feel like that would not end well. So yeah, again, if we're talking like in terms of through the whole menu, I think the tisane of rose hip sounds like the one I'd most likely go for.
Interesting. So I mean, all of these are kind of, I had to kind of bob and weave with these ones. So as I said at the very top of the episode, I tried not to extrapolate too much of my own like wants and whims or like what I kind of assumed was on different planes, because that kind of defeated the purpose of what I was trying to do. And that's also another episode in itself. Like that's more akin to like our hypotheticals episodes where we talk about, what would they have on this plane? So the coffee, the Ravnican coffee, is the one on this menu that I kind of thought, I'm going to put my own little spin on this, because the writers who write Ravnican stories from fucking 98 to 2021 are obsessed with fucking coffee on Ravnica. It is referenced in so many stories that I really didn't want to not include it because it just seemed too important not to include, but they didn't really ever describe it, at least not in places that I could find. So with that one, I knew that Ravnica is Eastern European, specifically referenced a lot of Prague in the design of Ravnica. And in Prague and the rest of the Czech Republic, they use Turkish style coffee is like their kind of like traditional coffee. Funnily enough, that part of the world is actually very big on international coffees, which is a whole different conversation. But I knew that the kind of the baseline was Turkish style coffee, which is you put the beans in the cup is then filled with water, and the beans, the finely ground beans, are left in the cup. It's not instant coffee; they're there to kind of congeal at the bottom, right? Yeah. So that's how I kind of worked that one around.
Yeah, it's one of the most prevalent, like, real-world references. I think it's one of the ones that made me notice it, like, the most when I saw it. So I'm like, oh, okay. Because I guess then it calls up the question, again, whenever they mention anything that has a specificity, it opens up the door to questioning the specificity of it. Of climate-wise, obviously, where is all of this being grown? Because, I mean, you understand that you've got to understand certain, like, species of plant grow better in sunlight, so it wouldn't necessarily be looked after by the Golgari because that's usually underground. Like, and again, this is where it's interesting to think that so they do obviously have areas of, like, say maybe the rubber belt or whatever that are like meant for agriculture, because Ravnica specifically being a city, a plain wide city, kind of causing the question of, well, where'd you get your food from then? You know, so it is interesting that they drop it in so much. I think it's because coffee is it's such a simple thing in terms, it doesn't go through a lot of processes between growing and consuming. It's so ubiquitous across the entire world, and obviously everyone loves coffee. So
sure, I think it's quite an urban city drink as well. Like that's the kind of stereotype, and I think Ravnica, as much as it's based on a lot of Eastern European cities, whatever, it also has that kind of like New York feel, right? It has that kind of capital city vibe, which you know, everyone drinks coffee. I'm a big coffee drinker, so I'd probably go for the Cappy actually, which is the Indian style foamy coffee. So the references here are the Tisane of Rose Hips is referenced in the World of Quest by Kate Elliott, again 2019. Again in I think it's Linden, Queen Rowan brings Queen Linden Tisane of Rose Hips. Rose hips are like vaguely poisonous as well, I think I read, so you have to prepare them in a certain way.
Yeah,
they're literally the rose fruits from the rose flower, which is why they're like a pseudo fruit, because they're not like it's not like a tree producing it. They're more like they're kind of, they're a pseudo fruit. I don't know how to describe it. And a Tisane, I don't know how to quite pronounce that word. When I looked it up, it's like that's like another way that you would reference serving a fruit tea, like a pot of coffee or something.
Oh, okay, right.
The coffee, as I've said, the reference I took specifically for the coffee is from the story Catching Up by Kelly Diggs. Jace is being shown to be obsessed with coffee. There's lots of references across all different magic stories about Jace.
Shocking that he needs to stay keyed in all the time.
Yeah, quite. But then Argus Koss is shown to be drinking coffee as well through the older like dissension stories and all that kind of thing. So it's a big part of Ravnica, as I say. Cappy is being drunk by Gideon, in the story Quiet Moments by Michael Yashau from 2016, who Michael will also jumped into our Twitter threads to help us out quite a bit as well, so thank you very much to them. And is described as being like a foamy coffee, and Gideon is actually drinking it, and his thought process is that every plane has their version of coffee, so coffee seems to be something that's quite ubiquitous across the multiverse, because he's literally thinking every plane he goes to has a dark brown liquid that perks you up. So
sure. I guess it's the same here, right? It's either coffee or tea, both of which kind of serve the same, caffeinated function of keeping the world actually running.
And Sweet Lassie is an Indian-style yogurt-based drink. It's very simple. It's literally basically yogurt and water, but you can add things. And there's also lots of it's referenced in the story Renewal, again by the Magic Creative Team on the plane of Kaladesh. Lassi is a drink that's kind of odd because I could have put several different versions, because like a lot of Indian food, it very much depends on who's preparing it, what part of the country you're preparing it in, and all this kind of thing. Like regional style is a big part of a lot of their food. And Sweet Lassi is the one where it's basically like a milkshake, but you can also get ones that are more like savory, and there is also a style of Lassi specifically that's brewed with cannabis. So pretty interested to see what that's like.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested to see what that's like. I've tried both. I've tried a savoury one, thinking it was a sweet one, and buddy,
Oh, really? You've
don't
had
make.
some? I've never had it
Yeah,
before.
yeah. I quite like it. I mean, I really like. I like pseudo sweet things from other countries. I don't particularly like pastries from other countries because they tend to have like Western sugar is usually very, very sweet.
Mm.
So it's a weird switch up for my taste buds. As I said earlier, my sweet tooth is extreme. I either like extreme sweet taste or I don't really like sweet things at all. But yeah, Lassie's like, I'm a massive, massive dairy fan. Another reason why being vegan would be impossible for me. But yeah, but Lassie's really tasty. Again, I wouldn't want it at the end of a meal because it's quite heavy. Again, if I'm drinking red wine, I've had the situation before where cream and wine don't mix, and I don't really want to repeat it. But yeah, there are there's a few things I wanted to kind of like point out, like just in my musings of doing a little bit of research. One of which was I came across Utopia Tree, which is really interesting flavor text, and it talks about how the fruit of the fable tree takes on the flavor of whatever food you love most. Which is really interesting to think that, because obviously you've created a sensible menu, right? With parameters that we can understand reasonably without having to jump to conclusions or make presumptions about colors that we didn't know existed or flavors that we don't know exist yet. But Utopia Tree is almost like that kind of magic quality to it of taking an idea of food and going, well, it can taste to whatever you want it to be, maybe because it sparks something in your brain, and it's that like relief of having the first sip of water after a hard day's work. That water tastes better than any other water you could possibly try. Things like mushrooms are a big thing for me because I think mushrooms are a great like food stuff in general. But if you think about things like phthalates in magic,
yes. So phthalates was something that a lot of people brought up. Were the little phthalid sort of story arc, which of their sort of existence.
And do you have something? Is it like cruel then? If you have this little phthalid guy on the side who keeps growing mushrooms, is it okay just to pick them and
well, the phthalids were originally cultivated by the elves of Dominaria as a foodstuff. Then they became sentient, and now they farm saplings and eat saplings. So it's just it's a whole food chain thing.
Yeah, and then
people were also to continue your point. People were also talking about things like the Cosmos Elixir from Kaldheim. Because it's tree sap food, 1,000-year elixir, the wine of blood and iron, which Godot drinks on a card. Like, there's all these things which people were kind of referencing, and I was like, I could put those in if I wanted to do like a purely fantastical menu.
Yeah.
There's actually
quite
very
a lot
specific,
of stuff, isn't it?
Oh yes.
Yeah, I guess like Cosmos elixirs can be very difficult to get hold of, but I imagine would taste similar to like honey or maple syrup or something like that. Which I guess, in a grand scheme of things, would be one of the best things that you could taste in the multiverse. Because again, synthetic foods don't exist. I also looked at like say off the back of phthalates and things. I was looking like truffle snout, which obviously truffle snout is a boar that goes and searches out truffles. But in my mind, I'm imagining a pig that's also got the flavor of mushrooms, and you could probably do some really like if you're going to be macabre. And let's talk about it from like an unstable point of view of where you're trying to like breed different animals together to create the best like type of food, like a turducken. Like you don't actually have a duck inside a turkey. No, you bred a turducken, so like it has the flavor of a duck but the size of a turkey. So like things like that are kind of interesting. And again, that strays more into hypotheticals of Madge. But I also saw in Time Out from Unstable. There's a little goblin stuck in a cookie jar after trying to raid the cookie jar. So obviously things like Unstable are difficult because Babylovia is a plane that's a little bit more self-aware from a meta point of view. Obviously it understands what it's doing, so I think they can get away with having super advanced technology and stuff that's even like modern day or slightly futuristic. So I think that's a bit of a cheat. The only other one I saw were things like obviously Disrupt Decorum, where you can see varied feasts and stuff, but you've got to assume beyond the particulars that you've found that the most average food is just going to be meat, cheese.
Well,
bread.
yeah, like there was a story. I really wanted to find a Fiorum one, and there are cards from Fiorum which do show things like tomatoes and whatever. So you can assume it's like Italian food. But there was the one story where I was like, I know a character eats in that story. Is the Queen Marchesa story from Conspiracy. I can't even remember what the name of it is. It's in a Law Shop video. I reference it. But she's sitting down having a meal. And I was like, what meal is she eating? Is it going to be pasta? Is it going to be whatever? And she's eating lamb. And that's all it's described about it. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, lamb as well. Like, sheep don't necessarily exist on every plane, right? Again, you don't want to just list random meat. And again, it's weird that we don't see that much of much confirmation of certain like species eating other species. Like when you said about the Viashino curry, it's a Viashino style curry, but is there also Viashino curry out there?
Oh, undoubtedly, probably.
You know what I mean? Like obviously certain races will eat other races more reasonably.
It's an uncard called Saute, but it is also referenced in a Black Border card. There's a similar reference where Beebles,
indeed. The little popping sounds as you pop them in your mouth.
And also
Popcorn
the
chicken is what I imagine when I see
yeah,
that.
the flavor text on that is attributed. There's a quote from. I'm going to say this
don't
character's name.
try. Good
I'm
luck.
going to
Good
try.
luck. Good.
So the character's name is Asmoran Moradik ad Asitina Kalutaka.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Asmo. If you type
Yes.
in lore semicolon Asmo into Scryfall, it just brings up anyway. There are 3 cards with this character who's a chef and food critic called Granite Gargoyle, Lightning Axe, and Saute. And it's describing how to prepare different things across the multiverse. And so that was kind of a good one. The Lightning Axe flavor text reads, a gargoyle's meat can be carved with an ordinary cleaver, but it is a protruce hide, for its protruce hide. So you can't cut its bum, but you can do everything else. The Underworld Cookbook is his book that he's writing from. So I could have included that, but it just didn't seem quite
Yes, that's the
specific
one.
enough.
The main thing that flagged in my head when you said that, and I looked up, and weirdly enough, I know that it's a big meme and people wanted it to be on a card. I think they deliberately made the name long enough that you can't fit it reasonably on a card anyway.
No.
And the fact it's only got these 3 cards across varying degree. I guess Lightning Axe originally was printed earlier, but the fact, on Granite Gargoyle you've got this immediately, the Underworld Cookbook. It's the only real reference we have for an actual cookbook in Magic, and it's very light. And as you say, like again, if there were sautéed beebles available, my brain wants to go, yeah, it's delicious. What's the difference between that and chicken? But then seeing all of their individual little faces, does that then make me go, well, maybe not? And we know that Beebles are sentient enough to be a planeswalker, so questionable, you know? But the fact, don't put the flavor. Also, actually saying that, this is another thing I love. Fat Ass is a card, and it specifically says, "Do not eat the delicious cards," and you get it gets a +2/+2 or whatever if you're eating when the card's in play, which I think is genius. So I do like that Unhinged and Unglued, they played around with this eating aesthetic, but obviously they moved away from it a little bit because eating Beebles is bad. You shouldn't eat Beebles.
For sure. Right, well, that's it, Nathan. So that is my first crack at the restaurant at the end of the Multiverse Menu. I was pretty happy with it. It was really interesting referencing these and trying to search through all these cards, because there's 100 references. I haven't even scratched the surface, really, about all the thousands of references to food and whatever else. And I'm sure there's whole menus that we could do if all we did was extrapolate for what kind of foods are from where, and just looking at card art and kind of deciding, well, that fruits are this or that meats are that. But yeah, and what I've noticed as well is that the reference to food and drink, there are certainly certain writers that rely on it more, but it seems to be also, the more I think the world building becomes important, the more writers are starting to focus on it as a way of storytelling and fleshing things out.
Yeah.
So it's becoming more popular. I dare say in about 5 or 6 years, you could do another Multiverse Menu and it would be just absolutely full with highly detailed meals and food and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess you've got, again, food is now in a literal a subtype within the game. So I don't think they're just going to limit that to Ikoria. I imagine we'll see it in another plane at another time when they can kind of fit it in and it feels appropriate. It's obviously why Eldraine had such a wide, varied selection. And also, I guess the point is that it needs to be interesting enough from a Magic point of view for you for it to be believably within the set, but also have a reference that you can kind of, again, it's like trying to come up with a color that you haven't seen yet. Like, it's very difficult to create a food or a flavor or something without beyond just going, yeah, it's a rock, or rock as in like ROC the bird. I don't know why that was the one I went for, but it's in like the cattle or something. Like, again, specifically eating certain races and certain things like thalids or whatever. It's gonna be difficult to create something that feels fantastical but also relevant. Again, maybe I'm gonna have to have a look at the Guildmaster's Guide or whatever, because that's probably likely to have a lot of real world references, but then Ravnica's a cheat because it's basically modern world. So that's why I think it was interesting to see things like Cow Time, like the few things they can do to spice up their food and their cuisine. That's what was really interesting. The idea of a whipped dragon egg, for example, I think is really, really cool.
Love it. Cool. All right, guys. Well, let us know what you would have picked from the Multiverse Menu, and do hit us up on Twitter at mtflavouring with your picks. Again, I'm going to try and show the menu PNG file as a shareable file with a link, but if not, it will be pinned to the top of our Twitter page. A couple of very small little details I found out about Planeswalkers is that Liliana doesn't know what a mango is. So obviously not all fruits are on all planes, because she doesn't know what a mango is when Chandra tells her what a mango is. And Jace doesn't like broccoli, apparently.
God, he's such a fucking
he's a dweebus, isn't he? He's
such a
absolute
dweebus. I only drink coffee and Mountain Dew and eat pizza. I don't know why I'm making him out to be this little teenage upstart.
Because that's what he is. Eat
He
bloody
is.
broccoli.
He is stamping around. Eat your vegetables. It'll be good for your brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Cool. Well, I think we've said enough. I don't know if there's any final words to be said. If you want to send us emails, guys, emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. If you have any more references that you would have liked to have seen, or you think, oh, actually, this is the kind of thing that I would have searched for, or oh, did you ever see this? Do let us know, because this is the kind of thing that we'd love to do again. We will be getting
Multani page rage against vegans. Why are you
Yeah.
eating my children?
Yeah, exactly. We will be talking about a lot of the developments that have happened in Magic in future episodes. I think we just wanted a bit of a break. I don't know if we'll go too deep into some of the subjects that just have already had way too much discourse.
Yeah, there's a lot of both directions. There's a lot. I mean, most of it is aired out to the point of being like, okay, cool, everyone's chilled out. Now, it usually falls back down to every like let live. What's the word?
Live and let live.
Live and let live. Exactly. It usually kind of boils down to that, even though there is obviously some justifiable, I guess, annoyance on some regard. But again, yeah, we'll probably touch on that in the future.
Indeed. Other than that, then I guess we'll wrap up. What's your personal Twitter, Nathan?
At the Fox in the Moon.
At the Fox in the Moon. My one is at Andy Manface. Oh God,
Good. Nailed it.
At Andy Manface.
Love it.
All that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for dining with us at the restaurant at the end of the multiverse this evening. We hope you enjoy your Planeswalk home. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.